My name is Rachel Bronstein. I am a sufferer of atopic dermatitis, as well as a former board member of the National Eczema Association, and I'm also a facilitator of the Miami Eczema School, which is run by Dr. Gil Josipovich out of the University of Miami, and I'm so pleased to be here to moderate this discussion today. I thought it would be best if we just go down the line and introduce ourselves so you can get to know the panel.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Gaby Morales, and I'm a parent caregiver of a child with atopic dermatitis, and I volunteer with Global Parents for Eczema Research.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Latanya Benjamin. I'm a double board certified pediatric dermatologist practicing here in South Florida in Boca Raton. I'm pleased to be here. My passion is atopic dermatitis, and not a moment goes by in my office where I'm not caring for a child with eczema.
And I am Erica Check, Director of Public Affairs and Patient Advocacy at Insight Corporation. We have a treatment for mild to moderate atopic dermatitis called Opzelura. I also am wife to Tim and mom to 2-year-old Oliver, both who suffer from atopic dermatitis. So excited to be here today.
Thank you. We don't have a ton of time, so we're going to try to make sure we get to all of our questions relatively quickly. So I'd like to kick it off to Gabby, who's the caregiver. What challenges do caregivers face in the doctor's office or in receiving care for their child?
Well, I will say that one of the challenges, or the biggest challenges we have as a parent when we go to our doctor office is like, they don't give us like a route where we can go through. It's really hard when you get there, you get desperate as a parent with a kid that is suffering 24 hours, and you don't see what is the, like they keep prescribing things that sometimes don't work, and then you see, okay, but give me the big picture. This is the option, this is what I can do first, and then this is what I can try next. So I will say that the misinformation or the lack of information to have the entire picture of what should you expect, how to treat your kid, it's one of the biggest challenges when you are having a kid with this condition that is not gonna cure.
Yeah, having been there, I totally understand. To Dr. Benjamin, on the clinician side, what challenges do clinicians face in assessing and prescribing treatment for pediatric AD patients?
Exactly. I think in our initial visit, or at least for me, I feel like when I meet a family for the first time, I do need that investment of time for them to understand. First of all, at least half of my initial visit, which is usually at least 30 minutes, is just to kind of see what you've been through, really meet you where you're at, because oftentimes families have presented with a lot of misinformation. They've tried, to their understanding, exhausted every possibility, every lotion, every potion, and nothing has helped their child. So I usually take time to see what they've been through, kind of assess that, and if there's education there that needs to be discussed, such as how many times are you even bathing your baby at this point? Because some families are even petrified just to bathe their child. It gets to that point. So really just seeing where they're at, demystifying anything that perhaps they've kind of collected along the way from the internet, or a physician or any caregiver in their family, you know, just kind of get them on the right path as far as demystify the things that are pressing on the mind. And then I take usually the second half of my visit to really then really kind of pick from the clouds exactly what their child needs and explain to them so that they're empowered, so you don't leave the office feeling like, wow, my doctor just gave me like 10 prescriptions, I don't know what all this is about. And really empower them, well, you're giving this medication to address the itch so your child can finally get to sleep at night for the family. So I agree with you. I think it really takes a lot of time and passion and dedication, especially at that initial visit, to kind of bond with your parents and your families and really understand what they're going through so that you could be effective in managing them after that.
And then the second part of that is, do you face challenges on which treatments to prescribe?
Oh, for sure. I practice from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. So, you know, in the West Coast, I have families that don't immunize their child. And so on the East Coast, what I'm finding, I'm in a pretty affluent area, I need everything to be organic. And the biggest challenge is, you know, our workhorse, I have to admit it, is, you know, At this point now, we have newer therapies available, but initially, it was a lot of topical corticosteroids that has a main driving role in treatment of improvement, and so you get that resistance where they have sterophobia, had complications of misuse incorrectly directed in the past, so you really have to get them over that hurdle that even if it's a hydrocortisone 2.5%, I'm not here to hurt your baby. A lot of families, you meet resistance with even just a mild topical steroid. So I really have to work with them to let them know I do respect where they're coming from, and I respect that they do not want steroids on their skin, and I work with them to offer them options.
Thank you. And to Erica, on the industry side, how can the industry help clinicians and patients with shared decision-making?
Yeah. As I look around this panel, I'm struck by how we all have different backgrounds, but we all have this shared common goal of trying to improve patient outcomes. And I think everybody in this room can agree that shared decision-making will help you achieve that. I think what gets a little bit unfair when you're talking about shared decision-making is that a lot of times the burden of achieving it is put solely on the dermatologist and the patient. And so, I think looking around this room on this panel, we all have shared responsibility in that. So I appreciate this question because I think from an industry perspective, take it very seriously and try to put in practices to help kind of facilitate those conversations. Should the patient try to be as informed and educated when going to see a dermatologist? Absolutely. Should the dermatologist ask questions to try to really understand the lived experience of the patient? Yes. But I think that I can help support those conversations, and industry and other people in this room, advocacy organizations should all be a part of that process. So from an industry perspective, I kind of approach this in three ways. The first is absolute transparency. And when I say transparency, I'm talking about the safety and efficacy profiles of the treatments that we provide. There should be no ambiguity when it comes to the treatments, and helping the dermatologist and the patients understand what our treatments provide, what it does not provide, who's maybe the right patient profile for our treatments, I think is really important. Two is the resources. We hear that those resources can be so overwhelming, especially as a parent. I have this myself with my 2-year-old, trying to navigate all of the information, the misinformation out there, really working to create accurate resources that help facilitate shared decision-making conversations, I think is essential. And my only pet peeve about that is when I see dermatologist-focused materials being given to patients. That is so unfair. So it's also about creating resources that are accurate, but also tailored to the audience that they're trying to reach. And then the last thing is being a true partner. In my role, where I kind of hold the relationships with the community and the advocacy groups, I prioritize those relationships. And what I mean by that is I am accessible to them. I am there for questions. If they have questions that I can't answer, I find the answer for them and put them in touch with the right people. There's nothing more frustrating than feeling like you're bombarded with information and you don't know where to go to get clarity. And I really view our role as industry partners of providing that clarity when it comes to the treatments.
I appreciate that as a patient. Thank you. To Dr. Benjamin, what can caregivers do differently to help their clinician and patient? Because your time with them is so limited, right? So making the most of that time together is so important.
I could probably speak for all dermatologists when we all have the common experience of, so what lotion are you using on the baby? Oh, I don't know, I've tried everything. Well, what's everything? So to save time, if you really want to jump forward to what you've tried, I think we all have our cell phones. It's accessible. Just take pictures before you go into your doctor's office of all the products you've used in the past, or what you're currently using. Of course, everyone, I already know what you're going to say when you say, oh, it's a T word, I can't pronounce it. Okay, triamcinolone, so, or that antibiotic that starts with an M or back, And so instead of trying to struggle to pronounce words or tell us what you've tried or tried and failed, just snap a picture. You can literally I've had patients with like 20 products, in a photo or 7, and you can scroll and immediately know what they've been to. So it's a quick assessment, and we're accurate, because when I document, I want to be extremely accurate. So instead of trying to pull that out, or I have to call home to see what's in the cabinet, or, I can't remember the name of my soap kind of thing, I think pictures were helpful.
I love that. And actually, when I fill a prescription, I don't even have to guess on how much I used. If I take a picture of where the tube is at or the jar is at, you can kind of figure out how much you're using. To Gabby, can you talk about the disease burden, mental health, developmental issues, and whether clinicians providing resources to help the patient in that area?
Well, I have to talk from my experience. I don't want to hurt feelings of any doctor, but for me, I felt that they never really addressed what we were feeling. Like, I'm talking about me and my daughter. She was having low esteem all the time. Like, I remember one time, and I'm just going to say it because that was what hit us. She said, just cover the mirrors in the house. I don't want to see myself. And I say, okay, there is a problem in here that I need to address with her.
And your daughter's 10 right now, right?
She's 10, but she was 3 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And I say, I think I didn't go to my doctor. I just started looking for a psychologist and a support group. And that's when I started having conversation with parents that helped me going through that. Because I couldn't help her if I wasn't good. You know, I was feeling miserable too, and I was trying her to feel good about herself.
Yeah.
And it was really hard. So I would really appreciate that when you, and I don't know if I am allowed to say, but the only place where I found a mental help, it was when we were to the National Jewish Hospital in Denver. We stayed there for 3 weeks, and one of the treatment was with a psychologist. And the sleep deprivation that we both have. So that's when finally I saw, okay, we have to also talk about how she's feeling, beside of how itchy she is. We also need to ask her, okay, how you feeling? She was not having any relationship with any other kids because she didn't want to be out there. Like, she used to look really bad. So everyone was like, oh, is this contagious? I say, no, it's not. So I think from that moment, I started looking for help. We also have help for mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can't do it myself. I'm overwhelmed. So I think it's really important that your doctor, I mean pediatrician or dermatology, to talk to you and say, okay, how are you? How is your daughter doing? How is she doing at school? How is she playing with other kids or developing? Yeah. So I think there is a lack of that information, or at least that approach to parents that are going through all that stuff.
Right, almost like a mental health checkup
Yeah.
quiz or something like that. And I know you're part of Global Parent,
Yes.
the Global Parents Group. Also, National Eczema has a toolkit for school, of talking to your school.
Yeah, and it's awesome. I'm part of this organization for 3 years now, and what we do, one of the programs we help other parents. So we have different tools, and we coach parents. It's not coaching them, it's just going with them through the same thing we went through, and we are still, I'm still seeing another kind of flare that I didn't see in the past. So.
Yeah. And to pass it to Dr. Benjamin, what are clinicians doing to kind of utilize that multidisciplinary approach to address something like this?
Thank you for sharing that. I know these topics can get into really vulnerable spaces because there's a lot of suffering that happens with chronic diseases, and eczema is a tough one. And I think as a physician, one of the beautiful honor I get, I feel, is that I have, along the way, I've been doing this over 15 years, post-training, so I have relationships, whether it's local or around the country, and to leverage that is a beautiful thing. So when families come in and they need that support, I know my community, okay, who would be a great psychologist? Who would be an allergist that can actually get them in quickly and kind of really address what we need, and maybe do patch and not blood, or prick testing, So I think for us dermatologists as specialists, we have a lot of networking and connections with other specialists and to support our primary care physicians and our patients to where they need to get to and to know that there are organizations that have robust advocacy and support and resources, and to even let them know that there's a conference that can be enjoyable for you and your daughter, to know that you're not alone, right? So sometimes even just a mention like that is life-changing, because then there's ways like you're doing right now, you end up going through all that pain, like you've kind of turned that around to give back.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're doing here this morning. So I think there's ways that, as a physician, you can be kind of like that solid ground, like a home base to come back to. But I feel very comfortable being the head of an octopus and like reaching out my tentacles and say, go over there and come back, go over there and come back, you know, and just kind of be on that journey with you lifelong.
And I love that, like, you do that, like, you're willing to be that anchor, because so desperately we need that for finding solutions in all these different facets. And then to turn it back to you, Gabby, how does that affect home life and how you handle all of this, not just your daughter, but the whole family structure?
Yeah, well, it's just when they talk about a kid having a chronic condition like eczema, it's not only that kid, it's the entire family. It's like the system works around that kid, you know? It's like my older son, like he's like, I was never there for him. And my husband was like, why are you always with Isabella? And I said, well, she needs me. She needs me every night. She needs me to go to bed. She needs me during the night. So it's just a different dynamic in my house. And even birthday parties, okay. Some birthday party, we can go. It's just outside is too hot. We live in South Florida, so summer is terrible for us. We don't go to
Me too, I
parties.
agree with her.
Yeah, we don't go to parties. And he was like, Mom, where can we go? Because your sister can make it. And I started changing that speech, but still, it's just our life goes around her. We decide where we're going to vacation because she can go or she can't. We decide what restaurant we're gonna eat on because, like, I don't enjoy my things anymore. Like, if I wanna eat somewhere, okay, if there's nothing for her, I will not go. I don't wanna, I bring her food all the time to every place, but sometimes you say, okay, if I'm gonna go out and have dinner, I need to go to a safe place for her. So everything in my house is around eczema and make sure that she's comfortable where we're going, that she's comfortable where we sleep, like all the things, hotel's room, everything is about how she's gonna feel, how her skin is gonna react. Because we don't know. Sometimes
I have a good one for the hotel rooms. One parent suggested her mom made her a sheet, took a king-size sheet, and sewed it like a sleeping bag. So now they travel with the sheet so that the hotel sheets don't have to touch her.
that's a good one. Well, I travel with my sheets all the time, towel sheets and everything. We can have a dog. My son has been dying for a dog, but I say, I don't gonna expose her to a dog right now. We are finally in a place where, so I can say those things, but yeah, my life and my family goes around her most of the time, which is, might not be fair for my son, and we have been trying to, but that's why we need the help of a specialist
Yeah.
to get there.
Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Erica. How can industry connect with patients and caregivers to provide information and support?
Yeah. So first of all, Gabby, thank you for sharing that because I think, you know, we all being in this business and seeing a lot of people with atopic dermatitis have unfortunately heard similar stories or anecdotes. Although each path is a bit different, you know, the suffering is definitely there. So I take this question very seriously because it's very essential to my role at Insight, where our approach at Insight to working with the patient and advocacy groups is to be true partners. And what I mean by that is it basically falls into three buckets. I first start by trying to understand immediately, right from the beginning, the priorities of the advocacy groups in the patient community. And what I mean by that is, where do they see gaps in terms of the care that they're receiving? Where do they feel like there are unmet needs or barriers to getting the best possible outcomes for their patients? And I start there because there's no better expert, right, on the patient lived experience than the patient itself. And I think understanding that and kind of starting there then helps kind of set the agenda for the way that we're able to support these communities moving forward. So I start there. And one thing I would say is sometimes that changes, and hopefully in a good way, so you start to address some of these barriers, and then they change, and new barriers pop up. So evaluating those priorities and kind of recalibrating is really important. The other way I do this is also by getting feedback from the community. So, all these programs that we have in development, disease education, awareness programs, things of that nature, are only as good as they actually resonate with the patient communities that we are trying to reach. And so, taking my perspective of what I've heard and putting it into a program, but not asking for input from the community itself is a mistake. And so really sitting down and having the advocacy groups and the patient communities take a look at the programs that we're working on before they launch. Does this imagery resonate? Did this message, land the way I originally intended it? Is this going to rub people the wrong way? That type of thing I think is really important. And then I think that just leads to more successful programs that actually do help move the needle in a way that's needed. And then the last thing is actually putting things into action, right? So we talk about the priorities, we have the good intentions of starting to develop the programs, but then actually partnering with the community directly to implement programs. So whether that is providing funding to an advocacy group on resources that they're trying to develop, or doing a large-scale disease awareness campaign that looks different depending on the needs of the communities that we serve, but actually putting things into action so that hopefully we are moving the needle in the right direction and then can address new challenges as they come up.
Amazing, thank you. So we thought we were going to run out of time, but we do have a few minutes for questions. If anyone has questions for caregivers, clinicians, or industry, we're happy to take a few if you have. No one wants to be first. Well, we're here if you want to ask us anything after. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As a mom and a parent, do you have a reputable Facebook page that you'd like? There's a lot of disinformation on social media, and I think that's part of the problem with some families.
Yeah, I actually, I'm part of Global Parent for Eczema Research. They have really good resources on National Eczema Association. When I found National Eczema Association, I think my life changed. Like, that's when I started making connection with parents. I think that was the main thing. Like, it's not to ask about treatment, it's to share stories and feel that there is a lot of people suffering from this. I thought at the beginning I was alone in this journey, and I was Google every kind of treatment you can imagine. We did crazy things that I will never do it again. But then I found National Eczema Association, I found National Jewish Hospital in Denver, and Global Parent for Eczema Research. That's what I am working with them, because I want parents to have resources. More than I will never give a medical advice because I'm not a doctor, but I can go with them in the journey, and they can talk to me, and they can say, okay, this is happening, and we can address their feelings, which I think is one of the most important things when you are going through this.
Yeah, I second National Eczema also. And they have a seal of acceptance program, if you're not familiar with it, where they have a whole scientific board of doctors that review products. They can't tell you if you're allergic to it, but they tell you of what's out there, kind of what are some safer choices, and it will have the seal on it.
And I agree. I've been asked to speak at the National Eczema Association. It's a wonderful group because it's really driven by the parents and the families, and I get kind of like the privilege of being on the side, watching just a community, a strong community being built around the compassion and what families need with children that are suffering from the condition. But when I was hearing you speak, what was bothering me the most was, man, you are already burdened at home, and then you have to turn around, which we all as caregivers are natural advocates for our kids, but then for you to go the extra mile to advocate and to find NAEA and to find National Jewish, those are resources I know about. That's what I, in my office, should be sharing with you, right? And I think we have a lot of great dermatologists that do that, and I think that's just a plea to continue. Ask your doctors first, because if I could have relieved that burden in that moment for you and shared some resources, I think that's the most helpful to do, even to plug. And then, it's really amazing when you like show up as a physician at these conferences and they don't know who you are, but you're just kind of like among and you're like feeling what they feel and you understand. It's just a really special place to be. But I don't want your message to be lost here, which is really, I think all of us as doctors can do better, and that we need to really look at our families and not assume it's another eczema. I hear that all the time, which really infuriates me. Like pediatrician or a nurse practitioner or telemedicine, oh, it's just eczema. Oh, no, there's no such thing as just eczema. And it's something you can't categorize because everyone has a different walk with it, and it's tough. And so I really think that all of us as physicians should take that moment. And I heard you say this again, so I'm gonna like speak on her behalf, if you don't mind. I advocate a little bit here. But just to say, how do you feel today? What's happening at home? What are you going through? And just take that moment to, and maybe you are on a great pause and you're doing okay, but just, I think it's well received, right?
Yeah, it is.
Just that moment to say you're checking in with them, because these are families you have the opportunity to see over and over again, and it's forever changing. To your point, kind of reassess as you go along, but I do think it is important to just kind of check in the psychological part of it and, support the wins too. Because, I couldn't be more happier when families come back and they're like, oh my God, that worked. I saw it change in like 2 days. What the heck was that, right? And so I definitely feel that we should celebrate wins, but also check in. And I learned that from you, and I thank you, because I always think I'm trying to do my best job, and sometimes we fail. And it is not, we could be doing better. And I think that psychological aspect is really huge.
Yeah, and I wanted to add something just because hearing you talking as a doctor, I will say, like, me working with Global Parent for Eczema Research, we're trying to do a huge campaign, and we are putting all of our effort trying to put our word out there. So if doctors could talk with patients and say, okay, this resource, you have these resources, and we don't have to Google. Right now, of course, there is a lot of things around, and it's easier to find them. But I think if doctors have that, okay, I will give you these support groups that could at least you can talk to someone if you need it. So I think that's really important for us as a patients, as a parents of a kid that's suffering from.
And the last thing I'll just add to all of this is just the advocacy groups is exactly what I would have said as well. And part of why they're so important is not only are you getting accurate information, but you're getting the community, that aspect that Gabby's talking about. So you're kind of hitting both. From that, you're getting support from people who understand what you're going through, and you're getting medically verified, accurate information that you don't always get when you just use Dr. Google. So
Yeah.
agree with the ladies on the panel.
And thank you for your question, because, there is a huge role in social media. And sometimes a lot of us dermatologists that are kind of championing that space, we have to meet that head on because there's so much misinformation out there. And so I think Facebook groups are wonderful, but to a degree, because it is the new parent struggling and trying to figure it out, asking someone that says, oh, yeah, just slap some Windex on. I'm making light and joke, I don't know what's being said, but,
Could be a TikTok video on that, and then that teenager's thinking, oh, I'll try this.
I will try this.
Exactly. So it's again, a good space, but it could be mixed. And, there's nothing controlling that and what potential harm can result. So that's a great question. So yes, you can find community, I think, on Facebook with moms. But to your point, I think we really need to get to a place where we have very scientific, reliable, helpful, sound, almost kind of like standardized care that's being presented to our families so they really get what they need.
And what would be amazing is if the dermatologists are in the know, passing that back to the pediatricians that are referring those patients to you, because a lot of times those pediatricians don't have that information. And so something that might start off as mild can go a very long time before you get in to see that top dermatologist. And so giving that info back to the referring doctor.
Thank you.
Any other questions on eczema? I know you all know someone with eczema.
Okay.
Okay, well, we're here if you need.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.